In the blood-soaked history of Mexican drug cartels, few names inspire more terror than Heriberto Lazcano Lazcano. Known as El Lasca, or Z3, he was the military-trained executioner who transformed from elite soldier to cartel leader, turning Los Zetas into the most violent criminal organization Mexico had ever seen. Under his command, beheadings became routine, mass graves were discovered across the country, and entire towns lived in fear. He brought military precision to cartel operations and unleashed unprecedented brutality that changed Mexico forever. On October 7, 2012, Mexican Marines killed a man they believed was Lazcano in a small-town shootout. But before authorities could confirm his identity, armed men stormed the funeral home and stole the body. To this day, questions remain. Was it really Lazcano? Is he actually dead? This is the story of El Lasca, the soldier who became the executioner. Heriberto Lazcano Lazcano was born on December 25, 1974, in Apan, Hidalgo, Mexico. Christmas Day. It's a detail that seems almost ironic, given the darkness that would define his life. Apan is a small town in central Mexico, poor and rural, where opportunities for young men were limited to farming, factory work, or migration to the United States. But Heriberto had another option, the Mexican military. Growing up in Hidalgo in the 1980s and early 90s, Heriberto witnessed Mexico's growing drug trade. Cartels were becoming more powerful, more violent, and more brazen. The government's response was to militarize the drug war, deploying soldiers to combat cartel operations. For a young man from a poor family, the military offered steady pay, training, and respect. In 1991, at just 17 years old, Heriberto Lazcano joined the Mexican Army. Heriberto wasn't just any recruit. He was selected for GAF, Grupo Aeromóvil de Fuerzas Especiales, the Mexican Army's elite Special Forces unit. GAFE soldiers received advanced training from American and Israeli military instructors. They learned counterinsurgency tactics, weapons expertise, intelligence gathering, and interrogation techniques. They were trained to be Mexico's most effective fighting force against drug cartels and guerrilla movements. The irony is brutal. The Mexican government spent enormous resources training elite soldiers who would eventually become the most dangerous cartel enforcers in history. As a GAFE soldier, Lazcano excelled. He was disciplined, intelligent, and showed aptitude for tactical operations. He participated in anti-drug operations, learning how cartels operated, how they smuggled drugs, and how they evaded capture. He saw the wealth cartels commanded and the fear they inspired. And at some point during his military service, Heriberto Lazcano made a calculation. Cartels paid better than the army, respected strength more than institutions, and offered power that a soldier could never achieve. In the late 1990s, Ozil Cardenas Gillen, leader of the Gulf Cartel based in northeastern Mexico, was facing pressure from rival cartels and law enforcement. He needed protection and enforcement capability beyond what typical cartel gunmen could provide. So Cardenas made an audacious move. He recruited active-duty Mexican Special Forces soldiers to work as his personal security and enforcement arm. He offered salaries far beyond what they earned in the military reportedly, $50,000 per month, compared to military pay of a few $100s. The offer was irresistible to soldiers who risked their lives for poverty wages, while seeing drug traffickers live like kings. Around 1997-1998, Heriberto Lazcano and approximately 30 other GAFE soldiers deserted the Mexican army and joined. They brought with them military training, tactical expertise, and a willingness to use extreme violence. They called themselves Los Zetas, named after the radio code Z used for high-ranking officers. Lazcano became Z3. Los Zetas weren't typical cartel enforcers. They operated with military precision. They used military-grade weapons, encrypted communications, and coordinated tactics. They gathered intelligence on enemies before striking. They planned operations like military missions. And they were absolutely ruthless. Under Asil Cardenas's orders, Los Zetas eliminated rivals, killed informants, and intimidated anyone who threatened the Gulf Cartel's operations. But what truly set Los Zetas apart was their brutality. They didn't just kill enemies, they sent messages through extreme violence. Beheadings, dismemberment, torture, and public displays of bodies became their signature. They hung bodies from bridges with threatening messages. They dissolved bodies in acid. They used violence not just to eliminate threats, but to terrorize entire populations into submission. This level of brutality was new to Mexico, and it changed the nature of cartel warfare forever. Heriberto Lazcano quickly rose through Los Zetas ranks. When the original leader, Arturo Guzman de Shana, Z1, was killed by Mexican forces in 2002, leadership passed to others. But Lazcano's military expertise and tactical intelligence made him indispensable. He helped recruit more soldiers and police officers to Los Zetas, expanding their numbers and capabilities. He organized training camps where recruits learned military tactics. He transformed Los Zetas from a small group of deserters into a paramilitary organization. In 2003, Asil Cardenas Gillen was arrested and eventually extradited to the United States. His capture created a power vacuum in the Gulf Cartel. Los Zetas had been the enforcement arm, but now their boss was gone. Rather than simply serving new Gulf Cartel leaders, Los Zetas began operating more independently. They expanded beyond security work into their own criminal enterprises: drug trafficking, extortion, kidnapping, human smuggling, oil theft, and any other profitable crime. By the mid-2000s, Heriberto Lazcano had become the overall leader of Los Zetas. He shared power with Miguel Trevico Morales, Z40, another brutal commander. But Lazcano was considered the top leader, the most wanted man in Mexico, after Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Under Lazcano's leadership, Los Zetas underwent a dramatic transformation. They were no longer just enforcers for the Gulf Cartel. They were becoming an independent cartel themselves. In 2010, the split became official. Los Zetas broke away from the Gulf Cartel entirely, triggering a war between former allies that would devastate northeastern Mexico. The violence was staggering. Shootouts lasted hours. Bodies appeared daily. Entire families were massacred. Towns were abandoned as residents fled the violence. The Mexican government deployed thousands of troops to the region, but the fighting continued. This war wasn't just about drug routes, it was about control of territory, resources, and criminal enterprises across multiple Mexican states. Under Lazcano's leadership, Los Zetas expanded operations far beyond their original territory in Tamaulipas. They moved into Nuevo Leon, Coahuila, Veracruz, and eventually had presence in over half of Mexico's states. They controlled drug routes from Guatemala through Mexico to the United States. They extorted businesses, charging protection money from small shops to multinational corporations. They kidnapped wealthy individuals and families for ransom. They stole oil from government pipelines, selling it on the black market for hundreds of millions of dollars. Los Zetas became a diversified criminal conglomerate. But it was the violence under Lazcano that truly distinguished Los Zetas. The massacres became almost routine. In August 2010, Los Zetas murdered 72 migrants, men, women, and children from Central and South America who couldn't pay extortion fees or refused to work for the cartel. Their bodies were found in a mass grave in San Fernando, Tamaulipas. The world was horrified. These weren't rival cartel members or police. These were innocent people seeking a better life in the United States. In April 2011, Los Zetas committed an even larger massacre in the same region. They killed 193 people, burying them in mass graves scattered across San Fernando. Many victims were bus passengers, pulled from vehicles at checkpoints, interrogated about cartel affiliations or family wealth, and murdered if they gave wrong answers or couldn't pay. The discovery of these graves shocked Mexico and the world. The scale of the killing was reminiscent of wartime atrocities, not criminal activity. The violence wasn't random, it served strategic purposes. Los Zetas used terror to control territory, intimidate rivals, and prevent cooperation with authorities. They targeted journalists who reported on cartel activities, killing dozens and causing many others to self-censor or flee Mexico. They attacked politicians who opposed them, assassinating mayors, state legislators, and local officials. They massacred families of rival cartel members, sending messages that no one was safe. Under Lazcano's leadership, Los Zetas pioneered total war tactics in Mexico's drug conflict. Heriberto Lazcano personally maintained a low profile despite being Mexico's most wanted. Unlike other cartel leaders who enjoyed public attention, Lazcano avoided cameras and media. Very few photographs of him existed. He used encrypted communications, constantly changed locations, and employed extensive security. He understood from his military training how authorities tracked targets, and he took measures to avoid detection. For years, he seemed like a ghost. Everyone knew his name, but almost no one could identify his face. Los Zetas' organizational structure reflected Lazcano's military background. The cartel operated with military-style hierarchy and discipline. Members wore uniforms, used military ranks, and followed chain of command. They had specialized units: sicarios, hitmen, halcones, lookouts, estacas, security posts, and support personnel for logistics, communications, and intelligence. This structure made Los Zetas more efficient and more dangerous than traditional cartels. Recruitment expanded beyond military deserters. Los Zetas began recruiting from poor communities, offering young men money, weapons, and power. They recruited Caibal's elite Guatemalan special forces, bringing even more military expertise into the organization. They recruited corrupt police officers who provided intelligence and protection. At their peak, Los Zetas had an estimated 10,000 members across Mexico and Central America, making them one of the largest criminal organizations in the Western Hemisphere. The training camps Los Zetas operated became notorious. Recruits underwent weeks of intensive training in weapons, tactics, and violence. Those who failed or tried to leave were often killed. The camps produced soldiers for the cartel's private army, capable of challenging Mexican military and police forces in open combat. Videos emerged showing Los Zetas training exercises, paramilitary drills, and weapons demonstrations. Propaganda meant to intimidate rivals and authorities. Lazcano's wealth grew enormously during this period. Los Zetas generated billions of dollars annually from drug trafficking alone, plus additional hundreds of millions from extortion, kidnapping, and oil theft. Lazcano lived well, owning ranches, safe houses, and properties across Mexico. He had fleets of armored vehicles, arsenals of military weapons, and employed hundreds of people in his security apparatus. But unlike flashier cartel leaders, Lazcano maintained operational security, avoiding the public displays of wealth that had led to the capture of others. The Mexican and American governments made Lazcano a top priority. The U.S. offered a $5 million reward for information leading to his capture. Mexican authorities offered 30 million pesos, approximately $2.3 million. Intelligence agencies tracked his communications, financial transactions, and associates. Military operations targeted areas where he was believed to be hiding. But Lazcano evaded capture year after year, protected by Los Zetas' vast network and his own paranoia-driven security measures. The violence Los Zetas unleashed forced Mexico to confront an uncomfortable reality. The drug war had evolved into something beyond law enforcement's capacity to control. President Felipe Calderon had deployed the military against cartels in 2006, but instead of reducing violence, militarization escalated it. Cartels responded to military pressure with increased brutality. The death toll climbed into tens of thousands. Los Zetas, with their military training and willingness to commit massacres, were at the forefront of this violence. By 2012, pressure on Los Zetas was intensifying. The Mexican government had killed or captured numerous high-ranking Zetas. Miguel Trevico Morales Z40 was challenging Lazcano's leadership, creating internal tensions. Intelligence suggested Lazcano was spending time in Coahuila, in the northern part of Mexico near Texas. Mexican Marines and other special forces intensified operations in the region, following leads and conducting raids. On October 7, 2012, Mexican Marines received intelligence about suspicious activity at a baseball game in Progreso, Coahuila, a small town near the Texas border. Armed men were reportedly attending the game in large numbers, which often indicated cartel presence. Marines moved to investigate. When they arrived and tried to question individuals, a firefight erupted. 2 men were killed in the shooting. When Marines examined the bodies, one appeared to match descriptions of Heriberto Lazcano. The body had tattoos consistent with Lazcano's known markings. Physical characteristics matched, but definitive identification required fingerprint analysis and DNA testing. The body was taken to a funeral home in Sabinas, Coahuila, while authorities began the identification process. Mexican officials were cautiously optimistic they might have killed El Lasca, the most wanted cartel leader after El Chapo. But then something extraordinary happened. In the early morning hours of October 8th, just hours after the body arrived at the funeral home, armed men stormed the facility. They overpowered the minimal security, seized the body, and disappeared into the night. By the time authorities responded, the corpse was gone. Los Zetas had retrieved what they claimed was their leader's body, ensuring it couldn't be definitively identified. The Mexican government announced that based on preliminary analysis, they believed the body was Heriberto Lazcano's. Fingerprints reportedly matched prints on file from his military service. But without the body for final DNA, a confirmation, doubts remained. Was it really Lazcano? Or was it a body double, sacrificed to allow the real Lazcano to escape? Why would Los Zetas risk an operation to retrieve a corpse unless it was truly their leader? These questions have never been fully answered. In the years following the October 2012 incident, no confirmed sightings or communications from Lazcano emerged. Los Zetas continued operating, but under the leadership of Miguel Trevico Morales, who was captured in 2013. The organization began fragmenting into smaller factions. Mexican and American authorities officially list Lazcano as deceased, killed October 7, 2012. But some investigators, journalists, and Zetas members have suggested Lazcano might have survived, living in hiding or having fled Mexico entirely. The legend and mystery surrounding Lazcano's death mirrors the legend of the man himself. He operated in shadows, appeared in no videos, gave no interviews, and maintained complete operational security. Even in death, or alleged death, he remains enigmatic. The theft of his body ensured he would never be definitively confirmed dead, allowing both authorities to claim victory and Los Zetas to maintain the myth of their leader's possible survival. The impact Heriberto Lazcano had on Mexico cannot be overstated. Los Zetas under his leadership pioneered brutality that other cartels eventually adopted. The use of mass graves, beheadings, and displays of bodies became common across Mexican cartel wars. All techniques Los Zetas normalized. The diversification into non-drug crimes, extortion, kidnapping, oil theft showed other cartels how to maximize profits beyond drug trafficking. The military structure and discipline Los Zetas employed raised the level of cartel capabilities across Mexico. The massacres in San Fernando, 72 migrants in 2010, 193 in 2011 represent some of the darkest moments in Mexico's drug war. These weren't battles between armed combatants. They were systematic murders of civilians, often migrants fleeing poverty and violence in Central America. The perpetrators were following Lazcano's orders or operating within the culture of violence he created. These crimes represent the extreme endpoint of militarized cartel operations under military-trained leadership. Los Zetas' expansion into Central America, particularly Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, destabilized the entire region. They fought local gangs like MS-13 and Barrio 18 for control of smuggling routes and extortion rackets. They recruited local criminals and corrupted officials. The violence they exported contributed to the humanitarian crisis that has driven hundreds of thousands of Central Americans to flee north toward the United States. Lazcano's legacy extends far beyond Mexico's borders. The recruitment of military personnel to cartels remains one of Mexico's greatest security challenges. Heriberto Lazcano and the original Zetas demonstrated that elite military training could be weaponized for criminal purposes. After Los Zetas, other cartels sought to recruit police and soldiers, offering money the government couldn't match. The problem continues today every year. Mexican soldiers in police desert or are corrupted by cartels, bringing training and expertise to criminal organizations. The theft of Lazcano's body also highlighted cartel power and government weakness. Armed men stormed a funeral home, overpowered security, and escaped with a corpse. The operation required planning, intelligence, and boldness. It demonstrated that even in death, Los Zetas could operate with impunity in certain areas. The government's inability to protect even a dead body from cartel retrieval was embarrassing and revealing about the security situation in regions where cartels held more power than the state. Questions about corruption inevitably arise from Lazcano's story. How did Los Zetas operate so openly for so long? How did they maintain training camps, arsenals, and bases in Mexican territory without being stopped? The answer involves widespread corruption at every level. Local police paid to look the other way, state police providing intelligence to cartels, military personnel deserting or collaborating, politicians accepting bribes. Lazcano and Los Zetas couldn't have operated without this corruption network, which they maintained through money and fear. The rivalry between Lazcano and Miguel Trevico Morales, Z40, within Los Zetas' leadership remains somewhat mysterious. Both were brutal leaders, but they represented different approaches. Lazcano came from military background, valued tactical operations, and maintained discipline. Trevico was a street criminal who rose through violence, reportedly even more sadistic than Lazcano. Tensions between them grew as Los Zetas expanded. Some believe if Lazcano hadn't been killed or disappeared in 2012, a civil war within Los Zetas was inevitable. The fragmenting of Los Zetas after Lazcano's death and Trevico's capture showed the organization's dependence on strong leadership. Multiple factions emerged: Zetas Vieja Escuela, Old School Zetas, Cartel del Noreste, Northeast Cartel, and others. They fought each other as much as rival cartels. The military structure and discipline Lazcano had maintained broke down. Los Zetas went from Mexico's most powerful cartel to a fragmented collection of violent gangs. This suggests Lazcano's leadership, however brutal, was effective in maintaining organizational cohesion. The human cost of Lazcano's reign cannot be calculated precisely. Tens of thousands died in Los Zetas' violence during his leadership. Massacres like San Fernando, individual murders, battles with rivals and authorities, the body count is staggering. Beyond deaths, countless people were kidnapped, tortured, extorted, and displaced from their homes. Entire regions of Mexico became unlivable due to Zetas' violence. Journalists, politicians, and activists were silenced through murder. The trauma inflicted on Mexican society persists today. Lazcano's Christmas Day birthday is one of those details that feels symbolic. Born on a day associated with peace and hope, he became an agent of extreme violence and fear. Whether this irony occurred to Lazcano himself is unknown. He gave no interviews, left no writings or recordings. We know very little about his internal thoughts, motivations beyond money and power, or how he justified the violence he ordered. He remains a cipher, known primarily through his actions and their terrible consequences. The comparison between Heriberto Lazcano and other cartel leaders is instructive. El Chapo Guzman was a drug trafficker who became phenomenally wealthy through cocaine smuggling. Pablo Escobar built infrastructure and positioned himself as Robin Hood while trafficking drugs. The leaders of Sinaloa cartel focused primarily on drug business. Lazcano was different. He was a soldier who became a criminal, bringing military expertise to cartel operations and pioneering brutality that changed Mexico forever. His background and approach made him uniquely dangerous. The mystery of whether Lazcano is truly dead may never be resolved. Without the body for final DNA testing, absolute confirmation is impossible. Mexican authorities claim fingerprints confirmed identity, but skeptics note fingerprints can be faked or misread. The fact that no communications or sightings of Lazcano have emerged since 2012 suggests he's likely dead. But in cartel mythology, ambiguity serves a purpose. Dead or alive, Alaska remains a legend, and legends have power. Los Zetas under Heriberto Lazcano represented the militarization of Mexico's drug cartels taken to its extreme. They weren't criminals who occasionally used violence. They were a paramilitary force conducting military operations for criminal purposes. This transformation changed Mexican security dynamics permanently. Cartels after Los Zetas couldn't return to being simple criminal groups. The arms race Lazcano started. Better weapons, better training, more violence continues today. The recruitment of GAFE soldiers to Los Zetas remains one of the most consequential mistakes in Mexico's drug war. The government trained these men to fight cartels, only to see them join the enemy. The question of why these soldiers deserted has complex answers. Poor pay, corruption they witnessed in military, the appeal of cartel wealth, disillusionment with the government. But regardless of reasons, the result was catastrophic. Mexico's most elite fighting force became the core of its most violent cartel. Heriberto Lazcano's legacy is one of terror, militarization, and transformation of criminal violence in Mexico. He took military training meant to protect the nation and weaponized it for criminal enterprise. He pioneered brutality that became normalized across Mexican cartel warfare. He built an organization that briefly rivaled the Mexican government in certain regions. And he disappeared into death or hiding in a way that ensures the mystery of El Lasca will endure. If Lazcano is dead, as authorities claim, he died relatively young at 37 years old, killed in a shootout in a small town, his body stolen before identification could be confirmed. If he's alive, he's in hiding so complete that no evidence has emerged in over a decade. Either way, Heriberto Lazcano's active role in Mexico's drug war ended in October 2012. But the organization he built and the violence he normalized continue to shape Mexico today. The executioner became a boss. The soldier became a terrorist. The defender became the threat. Heriberto Lazcano's transformation from special forces soldier to cartel leader is a tragedy of wasted potential and corrupted purpose. With his intelligence and tactical skills, he could have been a legitimate military leader. Instead, he became one of Mexico's most wanted criminals, responsible for some of the worst violence in the country's history. Heriberto Lazcano Lazcano was born on December 25, 1974, in Apan, Hidalgo, Mexico. Mexican authorities claim he was killed on October 7, 2012, in Progreso, Coahuila, at age 37. His body was stolen before final identification, leaving lingering questions. He led Los Zetas during their most violent period, transforming them from Gulf cartel enforcers to an independent criminal empire. He pioneered brutality and military tactics in cartel operations that changed Mexico forever. Whether dead or in hiding, El Lazcano remains one of the most consequential and terrifying figures in Mexican drug war history.